You've come to fight as free men, and free men you are. What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight? Fight against that? No. We will run and we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you live, at least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all these days, all the days, from this day to that, for one chance? Just one chance to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. Scotland forever. If you think it's important to build better, stronger men, we would appreciate it if you could subscribe. The men are fired up now. However, even after that speech, the men are fired up, but not necessarily the nobles. They're going to ride out and get terms for the king, from the king. So you ride out, battles are, the armies are like, you divide it up. They're going to ride out and negotiate. Again, they wish to enrich themselves what? At the expense of the freedom and the people. This is still happening today in Congress. Ask yourself that. Congress keeps spending money, spending money. Anyway, Wallace is not for himself. He is here for freedom and the people. Noble, a real leader. Leaders look out for their people, and that's what Wallace is doing. Wallace doesn't want the nobles negotiating. He starts to take off. His friend says, "Where are you going?" He says, famous line, "To pick a fight." And he does pick a fight. The nobles are offered land. Wallace makes his demands. Here are the king's terms. English army says, "Lead this army off the field, and he will give you estates in Yorkshire, including hereditary title from which you will pay him." William Wallace says, "I have an offer for you." The nobles interrupt him and say, "You disrespect the king." "From this king?" "Absolutely," he says. "Here are Scotland's terms," William Wallace says. "Lower your flags and march straight back to England, stopping at every home you pass by to beg for forgiveness for 100 years of rape, theft, and murder. Do that and your men shall live. Do it not, and every one of you shall die today." The king's man laughs at Wallace. "You are outmatched. You have no heavy cavalry. In 2 centuries, no army has won without it." "I'm not finished," Wallace says. "Before we let you leave, your commander must present himself before this army and kiss his own arse," right? So Wallace then comes up with a rouse. He tells the nobles to ride off. The nobles say, "That'll look like we're leaving." And Wallace says, "I know. When I give you the signal, ride off. Then go around and attack his archers. Meet me in the middle." So he's using his mind again for this battle. And by the way, about the cavalry, no battle. He had, he says, "Flank them, take out their archers, and meet me in the middle." Now, earlier in the story, Wallace has come up with a plan for the cavalry. He's looking up at the trees with his men, and he says, "Spears. We'll use spears. We'll make them twice as long as men." And that really happened, and they used it in the battle, and they won the day. And there's a great moment after he wins. At the end of the battle, when all in it, he and his men win, Wallace raises his sword. They've bled together. They've won the day. He raises his sword and yells, and they follow him and yell. And that's their band of brothers camaraderie moment. Reminds you of St. Crispian's and here in the Henry V. Well, how would it feel to defeat a tyrant, to defend freedom over tyranny, to do it with your band of brothers? They know what it's like to stand side by side and risk all and bleed with each other now. They're bonded even closer because this was a huge battle. They've won the others, but this was their big battle. And they will never forget this day, this victory. No one can take it from them. Wallace is knighted really over politics to get him the support, or maybe he would have been anyway. But anyway, in the story, it's for politics. One of the nobles wants him to take his side in the position for King of Scotland. So, and he also, this is interesting, rewards his men. William Wallace, when he gets knighted, he puts something around the neck of his captains. And rituals are good for men, you men, knighthood. He's now the protector of Scotland. And these, you know, his men are with him as captains, Hamish and his captains. You get that in fraternity, you get that in other places, a bond. These men are bonded to Wallace and each other, loyalty. His captains have it. And these people have it for each other right here. Wallace and his captains have loyalty to each other. And loyalty is a great virtue. It's underrated in America. The nobles are always trying to what? Also, they're fighting for a larger purpose than themselves. They're fighting for freedom for all the people. Nobles are trying to collect titles. It's a big theme in this. Now, after he's knighted, the nobles start bickering about power games and playing politics. So Wallace and his captains start to walk out. One noble says, "Where are you going?" Wallace said, "We've beaten the English, but they will come back, and you won't, because you won't stand together." Wallace is what? Worried about the right thing, the English. They're worried about what? Their own power and titles. See the difference? Still goes on today, right? So relevant for today. Many politicians are so worried about their power, position, title, popularity, whatever it is today, over what the purpose and the mission and why they went there. Now, I ask him where he's going, what he's going to do. He says, "We'll invade England and defeat the English on their own ground." They say it's impossible. Why is that impossible, he says. He believes they don't. "You're going to take table scraps from Longshanks." He says something like this: "You have missed your God-given right for something better. Let's stop here. God-given right. Where do your rights come from, government or God?" Come from God, right? Wallace says it here. We put it in the Declaration of Independence. We get our rights from God, not government. He goes on. This is huge. There's a difference between us, and you can see this today in government. You think the people of this country exist to provide you with position. I think your position exists to provide them with freedom. This is a huge point, enormous in this story, because it goes on today, right? You can tell the attitude, the arrogance of many people in government, that they believe you're there for them, that they're not there to be servant leaders to serve you, to do what they were elected to do what they promised you. They ran on something. This is one of the best lines in the film. You think, I'm going to read it again because it's so good. You think the people of this country exist to provide you with position. I think your position exists to provide them with what? Freedom. And I go, he says, to make sure they have it. See, he's willing to die and fight. Hero. Great man, not a politician. A man for his people. Great hero. He then talks to Robert Bruce, who wants to talk to him. He asks Robert the Bruce a great question, because you have to know the questions and the whys. What does it mean to be noble? Great question. He says, if you would just lead them to freedom, they would follow you. And guess what? Well, he doesn't say guess what. So would I. This is the hero Wallace talking to Robert the Bruce. Then he hits York and he does what they thought, the nobles thought, was impossible. He does what they thought could not be done. And he wins again. Longshanks sends someone out. He considers, and this is just funny, we'll throw this in, who he's going to send out to meet with Wallace. He says, "Not my gentle son." The mere sight of him would merely encourage him to take over the whole country. It's just a great line about the effeminate son. So Wallace says this: you think the people are there for you. Wallace says you're supposed to be there for them. Remember that one. I think it's worth repeating. Then there's this fantastic scene. Longshanks sends the Princess of Wales, the young princess married to his son, to meet Wallace. And she says, "I understand that you have been recently given the rank of knight." William Wallace says, "I've been given nothing. God makes men what they are." See, he's got this God reference behind William Wallace. God makes men what they are. Think about that. See his faith here. She says, the king desires peace. William Wallace is in disbelief. Longshanks desires peace. He declares it to me, I swear it. He proposes that you withdraw your attack. In return, he grants you title, estates, and this chest of gold, which I am to pay to you personally. Now watch what Wallace does here. Notice the difference in the nobles and him. A lordship and titles, gold, that I should become Judas. Peace is made in such ways, she says. Slaves are made in such ways. The last time Longshanks spoke of peace, I was a boy, and many Scottish nobles who would not be slaves were lured by them under a flag of truce to a barn where he had had them hanged. I was very young, but I remember Longshanks' notion of peace. I understand that you have suffered. I know about your woman. Now this has stirred her heart, and you saw the two French girls talking earlier about it. She's not loved at all by her man. He has no interest in her. And she's French and a woman. Now she's married to this effeminate fool who has zero interest in her. How she can respect her husband, who never touches her, has no interest in her, and is cowardly and not even interested in wars or battles or anything. He just wants to stay in his room. Now she sees this passionate man. She knows and has heard the story about what he's done for his woman and his love. Now, how many women wouldn't want to be loved like this? It's a great part of the love story of this. You tell your king that William Wallace will not be ruled, nor will any Scot while I live. So he holds his ground. He doesn't take the bribes. He's for his men. He comes through. Great man, great hero. He even inspires the princess. You can see it in her eyes. Why is he inspired? Because he's for the men and his people, and he's for freedom. He's not about politics, gold, titles. He's true to himself. He is who he is. He's lived up to the legend that she heard. He stands his ground and has what? Strength. Courage. She's attracted to that strength. And a man who knows who he is and what he's supposed to do. Fighting for a larger cause against tyranny. Yeah, that's what? Honor. Princess of Wales, attracted to him. She finds out she was lied to by Longshanks. It was just a setup, a ruse, and he used her. He knows now Wallace is completely truthful and that Longshanks is just despicable. And she already thought that about the prima, right? So the princess warns him they have to rush the army back for a council of war. The nobles are meeting. They've taken York. The princess warns that Longshanks tricked him. It was a trick that Longshanks is going to invade in Scotland, so he has to get back. Tells Hamish to go ahead. They're having a war council meeting, so Hamish warns them. They're just meeting. And he comes in, he makes another great interest, great directing by Mel Gibson. Hats off to Mel Gibson. This movie is incredible. He says, my armies march for days. We require every soldier, even yourselves. And the nobles say, with such a force arrayed against us, it's time to discuss other options. Don't you even want to barter? We can't defeat this army, they say. We can and we will. Wallace has confidence. We won at Stirling, and still you quibble. We won at York, and you would not support us. If you will not stand with us now, then I say you are cowards. And if you are Scotsmen, I am ashamed to call myself one. So it breaks out. They don't like that. Robert the Bruce has to talk to him again. He says it looks like rage, not courage. He says it's well beyond rage. In the name of Christ, help yourselves. Now is our chance. If we join, we can win. If we win, we'll have done what none of us have ever done before, have ever had before. A country of our own. There's strength in you. Unite us. Unite us. Unite the clans. Now, who would, by the way, about the clans, who would win if the clans are always fighting each other? The British. And maybe the nobles of Scotland get more titles and power if the clans are always fighting, right? Who wants to gain power by dividing? Dividing by race, dividing by age, dividing by whatever. Who wins in that? Who wants to get people to hate each other and gain power? So he goes outside. Robert the Bruce wants to talk to him again. He says it looks like rage, not courage. It's well beyond rage. In the name of Christ, help yourselves. Now's our chance. If we join, we can win. If we win, we will have done what none of us have ever had before. A country of our own. There is strength in you. Unite us. Unite us. Unite the clans. Now, who would win more power if they could keep the clans divided, or they could keep today, relevant today, black and white divided? Who gains in that? Race, class. Who gains with all this? Power. Falkirk, he trusts Robert the Bruce and the nobles. They've said unite. But in the film, Robert the Bruce betrays him. What do? The nobles have made deals for themselves for more land, not for freedom, not for their people. So the battle's about to happen, and the nobles ride out. They leave them and let them die. And Robert the Bruce is actually with the king under a helmet, and he watches the Scots die. Scottish nobles do that to their own people. For what? Power, title, position. Still happens today, right? People in politics taking care of themselves. So it's a very relevant story. Now Wallace rides up after them. He sees them leaving in the midst of the battle. Robert the Bruce tries to kill him, but he fails. Wallace tricks him, and he's about to kill Robert the Bruce, but he sees that it's Robert the Bruce. He's heartbroken. He's been betrayed. You can see it in the look, and later Robert the Bruce talks about the look in his eye. The Scottish nobles, and remember at the beginning how we set it up. Edward Longshanks understood the Scottish nobles. That was the plan at the beginning, remember? He would pay off the nobles to win the war. Historically, at Falkirk, the longbows did them in, and Longshanks won the day. Now, after Falkirk and the loss, Longshanks sends assassins to take Wallace out, but the Princess of Wales warns him again. Why does she do that? It's an interesting scene between Isabella and William Wallace again. These scenes were very interesting in the movie. And the second time, she sees a man, certainly not her husband or her king, the feminine guy now, who doesn't want her in any way, or the lying, manipulative, power-hungry king, not a lying politician that surrounded her in the kingdom, because you know she's surrounded by these lying, manipulative politicians serving the king. She sees that every day. Now she sees a man, and what a man looks like in William Wallace. A man prepared to die. A man not looking for power, but for his people. Passionate man who he is, not ruled by gain for himself. And he asks her, why do you want to help me? Why do you want to help me? And you know what she says? I think because of the way you're looking at me now. He's a man. There's the feminine and masculine energy and the attraction created because he's a man, right? She's a woman. She wants to be looked at by a man. So you see that balance and the attraction and chemistry it creates. So there's chemistry, passion here. And there it is. He knows how to make her feel like a woman. No one treasures her back at the kingdom. This man's probably looked at her in a way that nobody has back there. And he compares her strength to his wife. Also, he takes risks for his people and his men. She knows that. He leads from the front. He has courage. He's a man. Now there's another betrayal. They just keep betraying him. Robert the Bruce in the story doesn't know about it, but the other nobles make a deal for Robert the Bruce to get the crown by betraying Mel Gibson. His men warn William Wallace, but he says this is the only way. We have to be united. Keeps talking about that. And in the end, he was captured, and in real life, he was captured. Different setup historically and in the film, but both happened. And he refused to swear allegiance to a king that was not his. They called him a traitor, which of course he was not. He was ever loyal to Scotland. He never gave in. He stayed strong unto the end. In the prison, the princess even offers him a way to dull the pain, but he didn't take it. He needs his wits, he says. In the end, he stayed true and cried out for freedom in the film. And now from a historical article, we'll read from this article from Kalina Fraga. She wrote this about his torture in her article, How the English Exacted Their Revenge on the Scottish Rebel, they call it, right? Rebel traitor, because they wrote their history. He was forced to wear a garland of oak as the king of outlaws, and stood accused of sparing neither age nor sex, monk nor nun, as he raided the country. Though Wallace admitted that he had slain the English and had mortally opposed the English king, he denied that he was guilty of treason. Wallace is said to have adamantly declared, I cannot be a traitor, for I owe no allegiance to Edward. He is not my sovereign. He never received my homage, and whilst life is in this persecuted body, he shall never receive it. After a brief trial, the Scottish warrior was found guilty on August 23rd. Edward made sure that William Wallace's death would be set an example. Because what? He didn't want anybody to follow in his footsteps. Wallace was promptly stripped naked, and this is true historically, tied to a hurdle attached to 2 horses. He was dragged for 6 miles from London toward the gallows in Smithfield as crowds jeered, threw trash, excrement at him, and they beat him with sticks. In Smithfield, Wallace was hanged by the neck and revived. Then his executioner cut off his testicles, cut out his intestines, and burned them in front of Wallace. They also cut off his head. According to Undiscovered Scotland, in this article, too, it's in this article, William Wallace's death didn't end his suffering. His body was also cut into quarters and put on display in Newcastle, Stirling, Perth, Berwick. I don't know if that's correct pronunciation, but the English also triumphantly stuck Wallace's head on a spike at London Bridge. The nobles, Robert the Bruce, William Wallace, what about them? Something to think about. Politics still goes on today. William Wallace and the nobles, what were the differences? We talked about them. And what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to stand for? What do you want to have stood for at the end of it? What do you want to be remembered for? William Wallace is remembered as a hero today in Scotland. He had an impact. Scotland remembers him, and that they fought for his freedom. And you can fight for the freedom here. You can stand for freedom here, because it can slip away. You've seen it rapidly if men don't stand. Voice that they must maintain their freedoms. What do you want to be remembered for again? I'll say it again. Think about it. Reflect. Being a good friend, being a man of courage, standing for freedom. In the year of our Lord, 1314, patriots of Scotland, starving and outnumbered, charged the fields. They fought like warrior poets. They fought like Scotsmen and won their freedom, forging stronger men, deeper male friendships, and creating better thinkers. Thank you. If you think it's important to build better, stronger men, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to this channel right now.